Ekotürk'ten merhabalar. Bugün önemli bir konuğumuz var. Tunus'ta seyyar satıcı Muhammed Bouazizi'nin 17 Aralık 2010'da kendini yakması Arap Bahar'ının fitilini ateşlemişti bundan 10 yıl önce. Arap Bahar'ının üzerinden 10 sene geçti ve son haftalarda 10. yıl dönümü vesilesiyle çok sayıda rapor, analiz ve değerlendirmeler yayınlanıyor uluslararası basında. Biz de bugün biraz bu konuya eğilmek istedik. Önemli bir konum var dediğim gibi. 10 yıl önce bölgede olayların ilk başladığı Tunus'ta. İlk Cumhurbaşkanı olarak 2011-2014 yılları arasında görev yapan Munsif el Merzuki bizlerle birlikte. Selamun Aleyküm, Your Excellency. Thank you very much for taking time for us. It's an honor for me to have you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's my pleasure too.
Thank you very much. Your Excellency, 10 years passed since the eruption of the Arab Spring, and your country sparked it first. I would like to start with Tunisia first. What were the root causes that took the Tunisians to streets 10 years ago? And are these problems fully addressed in the meantime, or they are still there? Please, Fadal.
Well, you probably know that, in fact, we cannot talk about the Arab Spring as a whole. Situations are very different. Situation in Tunisia, in Libya, in Yemen, in Syria, in Egypt, of course. We can say that in Tunisia, it's a half success. It's not exactly success because we didn't reach all the objectives of the revolution. But I can say that the political objectives of the revolution are reached. Now we have democratic state, we have free elections, we have freedom of expression, etc. But unfortunately, the main reason that sparked the revolution, I mean poverty and corruption, those issues are not addressed at all. And this is why now Tunisia is facing a lot of problems, because the very reason of the revolution, fighting against corruption, fighting against injustice, social injustice, fighting against poverty, those issues are not addressed at all. And this is why, once again, I think the revolution has a lot of problems to resolve. It's not over. The game is not over. We still have a lot of problems to resolve. But in any case, our situation is much better than before the revolution. I mean, before the revolution, we were under harsh and corrupt dictatorship. And now Tunisia is rid of this harsh and dictatorships. So it's something new in our modern history, and it's an advance and it's a progress. And we have to keep this revolution alive and to go on, to pursue the rest of its objectives.
These days, nowadays, we see street protests in Tunisia. This time, as you also touched upon, the reasons seem to be more economic. How would you compare these protests with the protests 10 years ago?
Well, let me very clear. Now, the revolution, is no longer in power. After the elections of 2014, you have the comeback of the counter-revolution. So people are not protesting now against revolution, but they are protesting against the counter-revolution, because since 2014, you have the old regime in power. This must be said again. People are not protesting against the revolution. The revolution is no longer in power. What is in power in Tunisia is the counter-revolution. This must be said. So the people are protesting now not because the revolution has failed, but because the counter-revolution is again in power, and we have to once again to resume the revolution.
So this time it's not so you're not expecting a new wave of revolution, right?
Well, revolution is not the point. Revolution is a process. The whole process, it took more than 70 years for France to reach the objectives of the French Revolution. You cannot ask Tunisia to reach all its objectives in just 4 years, because once again, The revolution was in power only 4 years, from 2010 2014. Now there is probably a new wave of revolution because the social and the economic objectives of the revolution have not been attained, and we have to once again to fight for this to reach these objectives.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Your Excellency. Well, despite ongoing problems that we are talking about now, still, if we talk about success story from the Arab Spring, I believe it should certainly be Tunisia. There's no doubt about that. And you also personally played a critical role in your country's smooth democracy. I really wonder what made Tunisia more successful than the other Arab Spring countries.
Yes, we have. I always say that we are not smarter than the Syrian or the Libyans or the Egyptian. It's not the case of that we are a special country. In fact, this half success, because once again, I say that Tunisia is not a success, it's a half success. Mm-hmm. It is a half success for objective reasons, because Tunisia is very different from Libya, for instance. Tunisia is a middle-class society. We have no tribes like in Libya. Tunisia is a homogeneous society, not like in Syria, where you have Shia, Sunni, Druze, etc. All Tunisians are Muslim, are Arab Muslim Sunni, so it's easier, to tackle problems when you have a homogeneous society. And then Tunisia, we don't have like Egypt, a military, I would say corrupt military involved in politics. Our military in Tunisia is not involved at all in business or in politics. So when you have a middle class society, when you have a homogeneous society, when you have a country far from the Middle East, and it's a complex problem with Israel and so forth. When you have a country without oil, that's very important also. So it's much easier, to solve the problems, and this is why we did it. We did it because we didn't have a civil war like in Libya or in Yemen or coup in Egypt, but once again, it's for objective reason, and not because we are smarter or we are more subtle like other Arabs. Unfortunately, in Egypt, they have to deal with this corrupt military. In Syria, they have to deal with also foreign intervention from Russia, from Iran, and so forth, and even in Libya. So I'm not going to tell you that Tunisia, we are lucky, but I think we are more lucky than our Arab friends.
Yes, and when we look at the international reports, we see that in terms of rights and freedoms, well, most Arab Spring countries are worse, unfortunately, worse than they were before the Arab Spring. So despite the success of Tunisia, or let's say relative success of Tunisia, as you mentioned, is it fair to say that, because we hear this and we read this a lot, well, the Arab Spring has failed, or it turned into an Arab winter? What do you think about that, Your Excellency?
Well, I think it's not just, it's unfair, and it's far from the truth, because what happened? Let's take the example of Syria. What happened in Syria? In Syria, the Syrian people that just rose asking for their basic human rights. What was the response of the government? The response of the government was more repression and more torture and more civil war, etc. So is it the fault of the people asking for their freedoms, or is it the fault of the regime? The same thing in Libya. So the people of Libya couldn't accept any more corruption and more dictatorship and etc. etc. So they asked for their freedoms. And then they have this civil war. They have this attack from the counter-revolution. Is that so? You cannot say the people was wrong to stand up for its right. It's not fair, So because what you hear everywhere now is say, look, this revolution in 10 years, they you have just more instability and more poverty and more violence, etc., etc. Does it mean that we should have accept our fate and live for the eternity under the dictatorship? Of course, you cannot ask people to accept to live like slaves under corrupt dictatorship. We were right, to stand up for our rights. We are fighting for these rights, and we are fighting once again against the people who pushed the country to the revolution. We are facing now the counter revolution. So the fault is not the fault of the revolution. The fault is the fault of the counter revolution. This must be said everywhere, all the time.
Yes, so not the Arab Spring has failed, but unfortunately, like the authoritarian regimes and the dictators, unfortunately failed to address the challenges and the problems, right?
Yes, of course, and they bear the responsibility for for the revolution, and they bear the responsibility for the counter-revolution, both for both.
Yes. And now, unfortunately, due to the pandemic, Your Excellency, because as you said also, the Arab world seems to have many other political, economic and social problems. So not only in terms of rights and freedoms, but there are so many other problems like economic growth, especially youth unemployment and migration, of course. So, and unfortunately, the pandemic makes everything even worse now. So what do you expect from the current situation? Where do we go from here now? Considering all these, the regimes are still holding power in most of the countries, and the pandemic is continuing, unfortunately, and is trying to, it's complicating the issues. So what do you expect? What do you think? How will these issues be addressed?
I'm afraid that the things will worsen everywhere, even in Tunisia. Now, what we see in Tunisia is people getting to the street because some probably would find nothing to eat. Hunger is already the problem in Yemen, in Syria, etc. So I'm afraid that we will have more and more violence and more rights, more and more struggle against the regime. And the problem is that the regime themselves, they don't have any. They cannot address the situation. I think it's over their possibilities. So I'm afraid that the states, not only the society, but the state themselves, they can collapse. This is the real danger, that you will have the collapse of the state, and then this would be an extremely dangerous situation for the Arab nation also, but also for all the world, because you will have massive migration, you will have wave terrorism, etc., etc. So to avoid this fate, I hope we can avoid it. We have to. I would say that we need massive help from other countries, because even the Western country, even Turkey, even everywhere, people have their own problems. So I'm not sure that they are going to support the Arab nations for the moment. So I'm afraid that for the I wouldn't say the years to come, but for the months to come, the situation will worsen, and we have to be very, very, very careful.
Yes, unfortunately, yeah. So you're not quite optimistic, and you have good reasons. You have reasons not to be optimistic, unfortunately. So you mentioned Turkey. I would like to ask you a question about Turkey then. Turkey's policy towards the Arab Spring has been either praised or criticized for being too ideological, especially domestically. What's your opinion, Your Excellency, on Turkey's role and approach during the Arab Spring? What do you think?
Well, I think, first of all, I would like to express my admiration for what Turkey have done for the Syrian, for instance. You have probably more than 3 million Syrians refugees in Turkey, and they were treated, well accepted, etc. This is great. So we are thankful, we are grateful for Turkey for this, for accepting so many Arabs in Turkey. As a former head of state, I remember that we have got all the support from Turkey: military support, economic support, political support for our revolution. So I'm really grateful for Turkey, and I would say that this would probably strengthen the relationship between the two nations. And this would be a good investment for the future, because we are not going to forget what Turkey have done for us, the worst time in our history. And I hope this, once again, will really strengthen our relationship, and then we will forget about what was our common history during the Ottoman Empire and so forth.
So you are basically positive about the overall
Yes.
policy from Turkey's policy
Oh,
towards
yeah.
the Arab Spring.
Oh yes, of course.
Did it make any mistakes, you think, like for example relations with Egypt or other countries? How would you, could you please elaborate a little bit, because domestically and internationally Turkey is criticized, harshly criticized. What is the reason, you think? I mean, why is Turkey criticized a lot? For being too ideological, especially, you know, links to Ikhwan, Muslim Brotherhood, and etc.
Well, I think it's criticized by the West, and the West, I think, wants to be the only player in this area in the Middle East. But it's too late for the West. The West is no longer the only player. I would say is no longer the most important. I think now the West have to accept that there are a lot of players, local players, like Turkey, like Iran, like. And that the West has to deal with this situation, and it's very difficult for it to accept the new situation. But it doesn't mean for us as Arabs that it's a good thing, because for the moment, because this waves of revolution, because the weakness of the Arab world, we are, I wouldn't say under a new occupation, but I feel that, look, in Libya or in Syria, the solution is no longer in the hands of the local people. Now we see that the solution is mainly in the hands of the West or the neighbors. And this is very frustrating for us. We need to go back to the situation before the revolution, to be the master of our own destiny. And this is not the case for the moment.
I see. Then let's go back to West a little bit, and let's talk about the US, especially, particularly. Well, the US policy towards the Middle East in general, of course. There is a new government now in the US, Biden administration, and he just said America is back. So is it, and also, by the way, in his first foreign policy speech, he now announced that, you know very well, that his country pulls its support for Saudi-led war in Yemen. So first of all, I would like to ask, this America is back. Is it good news for the region, and what do you expect from the new era for the Middle East? This is my first question.
Well, it happened that I have met with Joe Biden when he was vice president. It was in August 2014. At the time, I have attended the summit, African summit, and I have a long discussion with him, about 1 hour, and I really felt that this man is very close to our dreams. He was very supportive, and he was very positive. And I have heard yesterday a new statement saying that he's going to support Arab democracy. I hope so. I hope he will do so. I'm not very optimistic about the relationship with Israel, because the United States, you know, they have always the same approach of the problem. So I don't expect any real change regarding the problem of the conflict between Arab and the Israelis. But I do hope that he will probably put the pressure on to end this horrible war in Yemen. I hope that he will put a lot of pressure, you know, to release political prisoner in Saudi Arabia or in Egypt. So this would be great. In any case, I think that the fact that Biden is elected is a good news, because otherwise, imagine that Trump was the winner. that would mean for the regime more repression, more dictatorship, more cruelty from the Egyptian dictatorship, and so forth. So I think generally it's a good thing. It's a good thing, but I don't expect any miracle. I expect just kind of probably less repression in Saudi Arabia, less repression in Egypt. Maybe the release of some political prisoner, as I hope, but mainly the United States, that they have always the same problem in this area, and that they won't change anything important.
I see. Not a miracle you're expecting. Also, of course, you also mentioned Israel. Well, there has been this normalization process with Israel after the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Sudan. Finally, Morocco normalized relations with Israel. So my last question will be on this. Do you think more countries will follow this suit? I think Tunisia does not seem to follow, at least for now. So what do you think, and what does this process, this normalization process, mean for the region?
Now, you said that Tunisia will not follow. Do you know why? Because in Tunisia, now we are a democratic state, we are a democratic society, and the public opinion, is matters. The government would be extremely. I think the government is afraid of the public opinion. The Tunisian public opinion will never accept normalization with Israel before the Palestinian people get all the rights, all the political rights, human rights, etc., etc. But in the country you mentioned, they don't have a political opinion. They're not afraid of their political opinion because the decision is the decision of the king, of the emir, so forth. But I think it's not really a normalization, because the normalization means that the people of the country is accepting this new situation. And this is not the case everywhere. So I always say that this normalization is in fact normalization between regimes and not between people. And what we need is normalization, is a peaceful settlement between peoples and not only between governments.
So this normalization are only between governments, as you said. Yes,
yeah.
This is a very important point, actually. So it is not going to mean anything for the region. No peace, as Mr. Trump said. The peace deal of the century. So it's not going to bring.
It's a fake peace. It's fake peace. I don't.
As he always says, fake news. So this is fake news from him.
Yeah.
There's no peace. So you don't think other countries in the region, you think they will, how will they adapt to these changes, especially in the new era in the United States? How will they, because we see some changes now, policy changes, especially from the United Arab Emirates, from Saudi Arabia. They are kind of toning down, and so I think they are kind of adapting themselves to the new era.
Yeah.
And as you know, also recently, gas prices, Qatar blockade was also, that crisis was also over, it's sold. So what do you think, how especially the Gulf countries will adapt themselves to this, especially this change in the United States?
I think they will be less aggressive, they will be less aggressive, and maybe for the Emirates, they would understand that they cannot intervene everywhere. They are not going to impose their points of view everywhere, because after the revolution, especially I'm talking about the Emirates, they thought that they will block all the process of this Arab Spring, and they will do everything to stop it everywhere. But now I think they begin to understand that this is probably not possible. That's out of their reach. So I think, and I hope, that will be less aggressive, and that they will let us in peace. All what we want in Tunisia is that let us in peace. Mind your own business. Forget about Tunisia. Forget about Libya. Forget about Sudan. Mind your own business. We have enough problems. We want to deal with problems, so please stop intervening in our affairs. And this is what we're going to ask from the United States. Tell your clients, to stop intervening in Yemen, in our political affairs. Let them mind their own business, and that will be okay for everybody. This will be good for the region, for themselves, and for us.
Well, also, Your Excellency, I wonder personally, because in Turkey also I sense that when the US does not involve in a conflict in the region, it's criticized for being inactive. For example, let's try to remember Obama era, especially for Syria. And when it does involve, usually there is a reaction. So what is the ideal US involvement in your opinion? I really wonder your opinion on this issue.
Well, I would talk about our what we have to do ourselves. We have to rely on ourselves, because I'm deeply convinced that we are not going to be supported by the West for promoting our democracy. We have to, because look what happened when you have the coup in Egypt. Sitesi has been supported by the United States, by France, by Great Britain, etc. And now he's a guy welcomed everywhere where he goes. So the lesson I draw from that is that we have to rely on ourselves to promote democracy, for our independence, and so forth. So all what I would be very modest. All what we ask from the United States is, please stop supporting the dictators. Stop supporting people like bin Salman, bin Zayed intervening in our affairs. That's all what we want. We don't want more. Just stop your clients from intervening in our affairs, because they are the main problem. They are the main problem. They are the problems. They are the main responsible for what happened in Yemen, what happened in Syria, what happened in Yemen, the bloodshed in Libya, the counter-revolution in Tunisia, etc. So if the United States is just would stop their clients from intervening against the Arab Spring, that will be great. Of course, I hope that they will promote peaceful discussion between Palestinians and Israelis, to come back to I don't know if it's not too late for the two-state solution, but I hope that they will do something for them, and that they will try to lift the embargo, the blockade against Gaza, because what's happening in Gaza is a crime against humanity. I can say it, because people are starving, and the children, women are starving. The situation is horrible in Gaza. So if the United States could try to lift this blockade, this would be great. But once again, I don't expect a miracle. I just expect a little bit, some improvement in some issues, but not more.
I see. Well, thank you very much, Your Excellency. It was an honor. Truly, it was an honor for me to have you. Thank you so much for participating. And when you come to Turkey, hopefully we will meet also and discuss face to face. Thank you.
Inshallah. Shukran.
Şükran cezilen. Ma selama.